Hello, everyone. My name is Moira Forbes, and welcome to The Takeaway. Joining me today is Indra Nooyi, the trailblazing former chairman and CEO of PepsiCo. She's one of the most influential leaders in corporate America of the past decade, having consistently been ranked as one of the world's most powerful women, and still remains one of the very few immigrants and women of color to run S&P 500 company. Today, we're going to talk about her latest memoir, My Life in Full, Work, Family, and Our Future. She'll share the lessons learned in her barrier-breaking rise and her perspectives on how to create more opportunities for women in the workforce, and why childcare is something she sees as a moonshot. Indra, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Moira. It's great to reconnect with you. You've always been a great interviewer, so I'm looking forward to this.
Oh, well, thank you. You make it fun, and congratulations on the book, Indra. I have to say, I really enjoyed it, and some extraordinary anecdotes and insights. But I want to start off because I was surprised to hear that you didn't originally set out to write a memoir, but instead you were looking to write more of a series of policy papers to see how you can enable young families to balance work and family. But you were told that I was too dry unless you brought in some anecdotes from your life. I'd be curious. I'm sure you didn't have much time as a CEO to reflect back on your journey. But in writing this memoir, did it give you a new vantage point on your life and your success? And did it inform in a different way your perspective on the workforce of the future?
It's interesting, when they wanted me to write this memoir using the arc of my life as a backdrop, it was not necessarily to create interest in the book. It was more to say, I too experienced a lot of the issues I'm talking about. I too have felt, the difficulties of being the only person of my kind in the room. I too have had children and struggled with childcare. So they wanted it to be my voice talking about the struggles that I went through, as opposed to separating the two and saying, I had a charmed life, I had no problems, everything was peachy cool, but I know other people have a problem, so let me do something about it. So this was everybody's recommendation, and correctly so, that you've got to make it personal. You've got to tell your stories so people can relate to you. And that would make the book a lot more readable. And in retrospect, the people who gave me advice were dead right. The book is readable, the issues are readable, the moonshot is more believable coming from me because of my lived experiences. And, living my life and reliving my life, good and bad in some ways. Great because some of the good moments you look back and you smile about it and reflect on it, and it gives you a warm feeling. Some of the difficult times brings out the emotions again, which emotions I had sort of suppressed for years. My father's accident, going through an accident myself, just going through all of these, my father's illness, thinking about all this, you sort of sit there and you cry, you shed a few tears, you reflect back, and then you say, good, I'm glad I had a chance to reflect back on all of this.
You mentioned earlier that part of reflecting back were your journeys often of being the only woman in the room, the only person of color in the room, whether that be when you moved from India to the States to attend Yale, as you ascended the corporate ladder. And you've described that you were always aware that women in the corporate world were climbing a much steeper, a much more slippery ladder than men. And even when you're at the very, very top of the ladder, it's still a women's ladder, still something different. Can you describe how that more precarious ladder influenced your career? And were there ever moments where you felt like you either may fall off or you just want to take yourself out of it altogether?
What I talked about in the book was the ladder to ascend to the top. When I lived my life, I was going from job to job. I wasn't on a deliberate ladder to the top. I was just doing the job I was given very well, and then the next job came about. So I wasn't looking up and saying, God, that ladder gets steeper. So I wasn't there. So in a way, the two are, one is an observation and a future-looking statement. One was how I live life. I think that any ladder that might be in front of you always looks less steep if you focus on the job at hand and do a damn good job. And then the next one takes care of itself. And it's easier to climb ladders when you have mentors who pull you up. And I had a lot of mentors who said, I kind of like what I see, and gave me a tug up. And when they felt I might slip, they intervened and said, let me tell you how to prevent this big slide or slip you're going to experience. So I had these good Samaritans at every point who prevented me from falling off that ladder. But I will tell you that it's way better if you don't look up and see the ladder, but just do the job you're doing very well. Believe me, everything takes care of itself.
You know, you've talked a lot about the need, and we'll get into it a little bit more later, to solve and create a more equitable workforce. But that's particularly challenging. One of the issues you really hone in on is the dynamics of childcare and the challenges that women and men face in terms of navigating the complexities of, for example, being a stay-at-home mom is a full-time job. Being a CEO for a company is, 3 jobs in one. And you've been very candid about the fact that you often had to make tough decisions as to whether you're going to be CEO, a wife, a mother, a daughter, and that came with really tough trade-offs. Over time, did you learn to better navigate those trade-offs, or was it more a matter of getting more comfortable with the guilt and tension associated with it?
A little of everything. I mean, I think it's high time we were all realistic about the challenges of doing so many things at the same time. The joys and the challenges. The joys are, you've been educated, you want to have economic freedom, you want to have a paid job, so you're going to go get a job and do well in the job. The reality is that you also want to have kids. That comes with a lot of work. And if you're realistic about the fact that if you want to do both, there are going to be challenges and trade-offs. You've got to live with it. And there is no manual or clear, to-do list that'll get you through all of these problems. It's better than, trying to say, oh, it's peachy, just a checklist and you're done. Or just, find the best childcare. It doesn't exist. It costs too much. Okay, don't just say get the best childcare. So I think the time has come for us all to become realistic, not be foolishly optimistic. And realistic is, we all want the power of the purse, or many of us want the power of the purse. We've been highly educated. We want to be intellectually stimulated. Many also want to have kids, and the country needs us to have kids. So the real question is, how do we deploy or employ these women who are so smart and can help the economy move forward into the paid workforce? At the same time, support them and their spouses to build young families so that the country can have a future workforce, a future consumer base. So you can't let them suffer through the stresses on their own, struggle through the stresses themselves. Let's provide the support structure to make both happen. I'm approaching this as an economist. And I'm saying it's high time we stop talking about this as a female issue, talk about it as a family issue. And families and moving all this forward is how economists should be approaching resource allocation. Instead, we've said it's a female issue. These are women just fighting for equality. Let's let it go.
You make a good point that this extends far beyond women, that it's a family issue. But when you talk about sort of the trade-offs and guilt, those are conversations that very rarely happen with male CEOs. There's the societal expectations that make it easier, at least on the surface, for working fathers to accept the price of long absences or to be perceived as going out and providing for the family. That's either a very different experience or perceived socially as a very different experience for women. How do you think about those differences?
I think most women are programmed with a perfection gene inside us. We want to be perfect at every job. And as a consequence, we feel guilt if we're not perfect at everything we do. Whatever we take on, we want to be perfect. It's easier for me to say it than to actually put it in practice. We have to let go of the perfection gene. Whether we like it or not, we have to let go of the perfection gene. We should do a good job with whatever we've got, but let go of the perfection gene, because the perfection gene just leads to guilt. And guilt eats into you.
When did you learn to let go of the perfection gene? Was there a moment in time where you saw yourself evolve to be able to at least let go of some of that guilt when the decisions were so tough and difficult?
What I've said publicly or not publicly, said to the outside world versus what I felt inside, two different things. Even when I say, look, I've given up my guilt, I've parked it on the side, I can do nothing about the past, you still have pangs of guilt inside. So I don't think it'll ever go away completely. But you know what? You can't do anything about the past, the first thing. Thing number two, you've only got one life to live. Do what you feel like doing to self-actualize yourself. And let the family figure out with you how to support young children. I mean, having children is a big responsibility. It's a wonderful joy. It's fantastic, but it is a responsibility. But it's not the responsibility of one person. It's a joint responsibility of the family to figure out how best to support the young kid who needs the support of elders. And at the same time, allow you as the person who is highly educated, wants to work, have the power of the purse, be able to do that. I don't see anything contradictory about it. I just see it as a major logistical challenge that has to be addressed.
Is definitely a logistical challenge, as many of us can empathize with. You're calling for this need to create more structure and support around the family for so many stakeholders to take ownership. You've also spoken a lot about this conflicting set of clocks that women face. Their career and biological clock often are at odds in terms of when you have a family and when you're really leaning into your career. Can you talk more about that? And also, how then do we make that more of a conversation that others are a part of versus this very, very lonely experience for a lot of women, being stuck in the middle of these two really, really challenging roles without a lot of support?
If you look at the corporate pyramid, it's the steepest pyramid. And when people come into the workforce at the managerial levels, I'm talking about the office workers, women come in large numbers because they're graduating in large numbers from colleges and universities. They come in about the second or third level, many drop out. Because as you move up the pyramid, is also your prime childbearing years. And you realize that it's very hard to balance both. So when the pyramid narrows, you have to perform even better than the others to move ahead and just keep your job. Or you sort of atrophy and stay at the bottom levels and the new people come in and knock you out. And so when you have to move up, you say, can't take the pressure, can't be a lifelong student, cannot learn to be cutthroat at work, move ahead. That's what it takes to move ahead. And so people drop out in large numbers. And the company has lost out a great talent. And we don't have on-ramps again to bring them back into work, which is something we have to address too. And so I think that companies need to sit down and say to ourselves, understand that the biological clock is in conflict because people want to have kids during their prime childbearing age. But if we don't do something to enable them to have the children, they're going to either delay having children or not have children at all, which is not very good. And that's why the egg freezing industry is one of the fastest growing industries in the world today. It's a painful process. So let's not talk about it as, oh yeah, just freeze your eggs. It's a very complex, painful process. So I feel for the women who do that. I really feel for the women who do it. But I can also understand why they say, I do want to have some economic freedom before I have a family. Because families are fragile, families are messy. I want to make sure that if I bring a child into the world, I can support that child, I can support the family, and I can keep my job. And they don't want to ever be cast, to fend for themselves without a job and with a family to take care of.
You've been obviously a CEO of a company with hundreds of thousands of employees, tens of billions of dollars of revenue. You've sat in the highest positions of power, the most influential quarters of power within the business arena. Where are these conversations today? What do you think is the biggest gap in terms of where leaders and CEOs need to be focusing their time and attention, and why does that still exist?
I think that any conversation on families and women is still fringe. people look at conversations on family as it's your personal problem. Why do I have to talk about it? So people are dismissing conversations on the family as something you have to deal with. Okay, because the ideal worker is still a male. See, and so it's all through that lens. There aren't enough women in positions of power to make this conversation more central. When it comes to women, it becomes more of a diversity discussion as opposed to, this is a talent. I mean, somebody once said to me, the incredible talent pool of women that we have in the country represents the biggest emerging market opportunity for the country. The biggest emerging market opportunity for the country. So I look at all this and I go, you know what? If we could bring family and women into the central part of the conversation on future of work, how do we make the future workplace more friendly to families and women? How do we enable flexibility, hybrid working, so young family builders can manage their family and keep a paid job? If we could have a more human conversation about all this, I think we would actually have a more talented workforce coming to work for us, and we wouldn't be looking at the acute talent shortage we have today, where more than 2.5 million people have left the workforce, of which 2 million are women. We wouldn't have this problem today.
We know obviously that this is a talent issue, that the need to solve for it is more urgent than ever, particularly after the pandemic.
Yeah.
What do you think are some of the biggest misperceptions around how you actualize this change? A lot of people recognize that it's very, very complicated. There is no one solution. But do you think there's some misperceptions that exist in terms of how to advance women in the workplace, the myths that need to be busted?
I think post-COVID, lots is going to change, because with hybrid working and remote working, you can employ a lot more women who really say, look, I'd like to work, but I also want to keep my family going. I think it opens up all kinds of vistas for women. But we have to be careful that we don't say people who come into the office are the A-class citizens, and people who work mostly from home are not the A-class citizens. So we have to be careful we don't create two classes of citizens and promote one and look at the other as a utility workforce. So we have to be very careful not to create that environment. But I think that what has not happened is a real conversation about how do we support people so that they can stay in the workforce for a long time, as opposed to if they left because they had a child, that's their decision, that's their choice. It's their choice because they don't have another option. They want to keep working. So if you looked at all pairs of hands available to the country, and you say, we want to deploy all the best talent, the conversation will change. But for that conversation to happen, you need a critical mass of people on the boards of directors and in senior management levels who honestly feel the issue deep down inside. Don't do it because if I don't do it, I'll be in trouble with the ESG guys. If I don't do it, there'll be some activist group that nails me. That's not the reason you should do it. You should do it because you believe that women are a fantastic talent that can move the company forward. You believe that if you reduce the stress on your young family builders, they can have a family and work outside the home, you will have a more productive workforce. You've got to think that way.
Obviously, there's the need to really focus and prioritize on some of these structural issues and cultural issues that you talk about. I want to shift gears and talk a little bit about what you believe were some of the skill sets or lessons that allowed you to defy the odds, if you will, in terms of your career. You joined us at our Forbes Women Summit a couple of years ago with Priyanka Chopra, and you talked about so the difference in terms of how men and women approach their careers. Do you think women have had to work harder, or how much harder do you think they've had to work in the workforce, also from when you started out to where you are today?
I don't know how much harder, the percentage wise. I mean, let's just say it's still harder.
What would you estimate?
I don't know. I think women still have to work harder, Moira. They just do. I think it's because we're still in the early days of women rising in senior positions, okay? I think at the entry level, it's become a fairly equitable place. But as you get to, if you look at the CEO as N minus 2, N minus 3 levels, in those top 3 levels of the company, women still have a steeper ladder to climb. And I write about that in the book, as women always judged for the fact that they're women as opposed to yet another fantastic executive. I don't know why, but this is what happens when you're one among many. You're just still in the early innings of the game, where we're still trying to bring more women into the top management so that we're no longer a novelty, but a common occurrence in the corporate boardrooms. When that happens, increasingly, people will stop looking at us as an oddity and saying, oh, okay, here's another talented person who's come into the corporate boardrooms or into the senior management of a company. We have to get to that point, which means that when we look at a talent, we shouldn't look at them as man or woman or whatever. We should look at them as, what is the qualification they bring to the job? Why are we hiring them? And I think many people feel comfortable hiring more people that look like them. It's probably easier to work with them, but not perhaps the best decisions that come out of that alliance.
You've talked about obviously the need for diverse perspectives, but you've also counseled so many on the power in remaining authentic in terms of who you are, not changing who you are to fit into a mold or structure. Like most things in life, these things are easier said than done. Can you talk a little bit about that role of maintaining authenticity in your own life and the particular challenges that women may face in feeling comfortable in doing that?
If your authentic self is so out there at Six Sigma that people sort of say, who is she? She's authentic, but she's completely out of the mold. That's going to be tough, Moira, because we have to be practical about these things. What I'm talking about is, I'm not going to remake myself to look like Moira Forbes. I'm just not going to, because that's trying to be somebody I'm not. Okay. At the same time, I don't have to become this golfing, fishing, going off for a weekend with the boys kind of a person. That's just not me. I have a family. I love being with my family. I am who I am. And I like to work a certain way. And I've distinguished myself through my brand of authenticity. I am not going to remake this brand of authenticity to be different, because if I did that, I'm not authentic. Second is that it's more effort to keep up a new image than to be authentic. Because you will slip up. When you're trying to create an image for yourself, you will slip up. In my case, what you see is what you get.
It's a lot of wasted energy, right? And in terms of the time and attention it takes to focus on being something you're not. You just sort of think of that, the lost hours or lost time that can be put toward actually achieving that success. People look at your career and the success that you had. If a young person came to you today and asked, how do you become a CEO? Are there things that you would counsel them or pieces of advice that you would share at this moment in time?
Just say, do the job you're doing very, very, very well. And make sure it's a job where it's a tough job so you can distinguish yourself and people can notice you. And while you're doing the job, focus on the job, understand the politics, don't get involved in the political stuff that goes on inside an organization. And put the company way before you. That's all I'll tell them. I will not say, these are the 3 things you've got to do to become CEO. Because the minute you do that, everybody starts to obsess about the next job and the next, raise you're going to get. Forget it. Just focus on the job. Now, I'll give you the flip side. There are people who say, that's what I did, but yet I'm ignored. I'm invisible. Then it's a tone of the top issue. The tone of the top has to be fixed. If the tone of the top has not realized that women represent a potent talent force and everybody who's talented should be looked at equally, then it's a loss for the company.
What advice would you give? So if those are sort of advice for people entering a company, for women who are on that ladder and holding on either for dear life to that ladder or feel like they may just fall off, what would you tell them at that point in time?
First of all, they should ask themselves, have they distinguished themselves in the company as contributing something major to the company. At the end of the day, or week, or month, or quarter, you sit back and say, what is my unique proposition in this company? What have I contributed to the betterment of this company? If you don't have a good answer for that, then you're just a position player. Others know you are a position player. Nothing wrong with that. But if you want to move ahead, it's because you are leaving a profound mark on the company's future. And that's the kind of person that moves up that pyramid, very narrow pyramid. It takes a lot of time, or it doesn't come naturally. It takes investment of your own time and energy to learn new things, figure out the interconnections between your job and other people's jobs. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of work.
People have often talked about you as one of the world's most powerful business leaders, most powerful women. The term powerful is often associated with your name. How do you define the term power?
Power to me is having a major impact on people around you, the world around you. And personally, for me, power is having a positive impact on people around you and the world around you, not a negative impact. Although power could do both. And so to me, power is given to people who can use it responsibly, who can handle it responsibly, and it should be taken away from people who don't know how to handle it responsibly. So to me, power is a double-edged sword. I've heard people refer to me as a powerful person because I'm pretty fearless. I say it like it is. I don't sugarcoat, I tell it like it is, because I honestly believe that too much sugarcoating, in fact, dilutes the message. Okay? But the big difference between sugarcoating and being realistic like I am is, I'm going to give you a realistic assessment, but I'm going to help you get to a better place. So I'm going to raise the bar and I'm going to help you jump up to this new bar, as opposed to raise the bar and say, that's good, you can't get there. Because I want you to get there. And so I think that that's the big thing about me as you think about the future.
Last question for you, Indra. The book is filled with some really powerful stories and a real call to action around a very urgent issue that this country and this world has to respond to. If people were to look at your life and your incredible story, what's one thing that you would want them to take away? What's the moral of the story that you think would resonate, particularly at this moment in time?
I would like them to take away the fact that you can do it all. Not have it all, you can do it all. You can be a mom, you can be a wife, you can be a daughter, you can be an executive, you can ascend. You can do it all with the right support structure, with the right help, with the right mentors in place. You can do it. It's doable. I'm a living example that it's doable. So start to develop mentors early in your life. People who come and pick you as a mentee, cherish them, revere them, respect them. When you work for a company that embraces its people as talent bases, not tools of the trade, embrace that company, work hard for that company. And so, basically, that would be my advice.
I'm going to steal one last question for you, Indra. You said that you can have it all. What do you think is the biggest misperception about what it means to have it all, given the realities, the challenges, the sacrifices, and the support that you just talked about?
Well, the misperceptions are, if you are a business executive and you have kids, you're not a good mother. If you're a mother, you're just a stay-at-home mother. That's the way they refer to them, just a stay-at-home mother. If you have kids and you, instead of staying home, if you go off and do other work, not just work in a company, people are like, oh my God, she must be neglecting the family. So somebody's always putting a badge on us. Don't. We are human beings too. We have hopes, dreams, and aspirations as women. We went to college. We got top grades. We went to university, got very good grades. And we can contribute to this economy and make it even better. by participating in the paid workforce, by having children. Thank us for what we do. Write to us saying thank you for your service to the country.
Well, Indra, we have many things to thank you for, and I'm just grateful that when in this quote unquote retirement, it's anything but that you have really taken up the mantle around such important issues at this moment in time. So thank you for the insights shared, and thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Moira. It was a pleasure talking to you as always.